Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Each episode, we share the latest discoveries, observing techniques, and stories from the people who explore the moon, planets, comets, and beyond. Whether you're looking through a backyard telescope or leading professional research, we're all united under one sky. I'm Tim Robertson, your host. Hey, and thanks for being here. Now, if you usually listen to the podcast in your car or on your phone, did you know that you can watch it too? That's right. The Observer's Notebook is now available in video right here on the ALPO YouTube channel. And here's something interesting. Over 50% of the people watching or listening are not subscribed. So take a quick second, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell so you don't miss another episode. It's free, and it really helps grow the channel. This show is made possible by support from you, our viewers. If you'd like to keep the Observer's Notebook going, check out our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. For just $1 a month, you're supporting the show. For $5, you get early access to new episodes. For $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you'll be listed as a producer on this podcast. Of course, you can learn more about the ALPO by going to www.alpo-astronomy.org, and you can join the organization for as little as $22 a year. And now, let's get started on this next episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. Enjoy. All right, welcome back, everybody, to this edition of the Observer's Notebook podcast. Today, we're focusing on one of the oldest and most powerful observing techniques in astronomy, drawing what you see. In an age of high-speed cameras, stacked digital images, there's something profoundly powerful about sitting at the telescope and translating light, shadow onto paper. Lunar sketching forces you to slow down, to notice the subtle changes in gradients, crater wall structure, rilles, domes, even the delicate contrast along the terminator. My guest today is lunar artist Mary McIntyre, whose detailed and atmospheric sketches of the moon have inspired observers across social media and astronomy groups. Her work beautifully bridges art and scientific observation, reminding us that drawing is not just an artistic expression, but a powerful tool for improving observational skill. Today, we'll talk about her journey into lunar observing, her process at the eyepiece, and the tools she uses while sketching the moon might be one of the best ways to be a better observer. Welcome, Mary, to the podcast.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, where are you from?
I'm originally from Lancashire, the
Okay.
northwest of England. I now live in North Oxfordshire, which is kind of very central in England. So we're pretty landlocked here compared to where I lived before. But I do have a hint of my northern accent, but it's got diluted over the years of living down south.
Okay. So when did you first look at the moon through a telescope?
Through a telescope, that was my 11th birthday, but I'd been looking at the moon through my bedroom window since I was a chronic insomniac from age 4 onwards. So
Oh
I'd
my.
kind of been aware of the moon and looked at it regularly. I had a south-facing bedroom window, luckily, so I was able to do that. But I got my very first telescope on my 11th birthday, and without knowing what the heck I was doing with it, I managed to get it pointed at an almost full moon. And I will never, ever forget that moment. I don't think any of us forget our very first view through an eyepiece.
Yeah.
And so that's when it kind of began. And it was always on a back burner for many years, but it would have been about 20 years ago when I had the opportunity to do some studying of astronomy. And that kind of really reignited the passion that had always been there, but had been suppressed.
So what was that first telescope?
I can't actually remember. I guess most of my friends that had one at the time, I think it was a Tasco, probably.
Okay. A little small
It
refractor.
wasn't, it was a refractor. It was a very long, thin refractor. It was white, and that's about as much as I can remember of it. I don't actually know what happened to it, and I really wish I still had it because it's
That's,
just one of those.
I'm the same way. That sounds like my very first telescope, and I wish I had it. It's just like so what made you what made you decide to start drawing instead of photographing the moon and planets?
My photography journey started about 15 years ago as part of some coursework I was doing for lunar photography. And I suddenly realized that I had a compact camera and some elastic bands, and I could hold it up to the eyepiece and keep it still and get these pictures. And then when I got a digital SLR and attached it to the telescope, I just became so obsessed with photography. And
Hmm.
one day I just realized, when was the last time I actually looked through a pair of binoculars or a telescope? And I realized it must have been over a year. And that made me so sad.
Hmm.
So that night, I thought, right, tonight, if it's clear, I'm going to have a go at drawing Jupiter. And those first sketches are, I won't say they're bad because I think all sketches are valuable. They're a snapshot in time that are very unique to you and you'll never
Hmm.
get again. But they're crude compared to what I do now. But it made me realize in an instant that by drawing it, I was having to look at it in a way that photography wasn't making me do. And whenever I teach astronomy sketching, I always say to people, even if you just do it once, it will make you observe better because it trains your eye to look in more detail. And that's how it kind of began. And it's become a bit of an obsession. And I do a lot of teaching of it now, which I love because it is a dying art. It's
Yes.
so easy now with smart scopes, mobile phones to get those pictures. But I don't believe that you're learning about the subject by taking pictures. You're learning how to photograph it, but then it goes on Flickr or Facebook and you never look at it again. You don't study the changing shadows or the changing landscape in the way that you do when you're taking a drawing of it. So I started with the moon really. I started originally tracing some pictures and realized it was completely soulless and clinical. Then I just thought, right, just go with this. The first ones will be a bit wonky, but that's absolutely fine.
Hmm.
And just honed the skill by using photographs, actually. Trained myself how to draw the moon using photographs of the moon rather than eyepiece. But now I do a bit of both.
Okay, good. So what equipment are you using now?
For my most of my sketching, I'm actually using a 102 mm refractor. It's an old Helios one that was given to me for free about 25 years ago. And although it's not the best for imaging, there's just something about the field of view and the comfort sitting at it that is just it's my go-to for visual always when I'm drawing. We do have way better refractors that give you a sharper result,
Hmm.
but there's something about that on a static tripod that just really speaks to me. So if I'm not using that, I'll be using my 15 by 70 binoculars, which are on a parallelogram mount, and I do love sketching
Nice.
through those. But it's just I've got spine problems, so ergonomics are always the most important thing for me. And the only telescope I own out of all seven that we have that I can literally sit for a long time and not get in a lot of pain is my trusty Helios refractor. So that's the one I just go back to again and again. And I've got a zoom eyepiece so I can kind of just zoom
Okay.
in and out and just refocus as and when I need to. And it's just the perfect amount of magnification and things don't move away too quickly because it's not too magnified. And I just find it everything about it is just comfortable and familiar. I've had it longer now than any of my other telescopes, and I just, I really love that telescope.
So do you plan your observing sessions around the phase of the moon or what features of the moon might be visible at that time? How do you go about doing that?
I do like to look at when the popular clair obscure effects are going to be visible. That's one of the things I put timings out for on my blog every January for the coming year. I really enjoy that. So I'm always kind of aware of what is going to be close to the terminator, what craters the sun is rising and setting over. So I do like to do that. For deep sky stuff, to be honest, in the UK, if we have a clear sky, you've just got to go for it and try because we really don't get prolonged periods of clear
That's true.
nights that often. So if it's a full moon, it's a full moon. I just do a bright cluster instead, or do the moon, which obviously is always there. So I'm not fussy about moonlight. I know some people get really hung up on, oh, it's a full moon, I'm not going to bother observing. There's always something you can observe under a full
It's
moon,
true.
so that doesn't stop me from being out.
Yes, I don't know how familiar you are with the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, but our foundation started with sketching the solar system objects, all of them. Before astrophotography, our journal was full of drawings of all the planets and the moon, so all the craters. And part of my role when the ALPO, I run their training program, which teaches observers how to observe. And there is no astrophotography in the training program at all. And like you just said, the more you observe, the better your eye becomes, the more sensitive to sight variations in albedo and all sorts of things. So it is the foundation of this organization.
Well, I like the fact that I always try to teach people not to have a Messier marathon mentality when you're out doing an observing session. Don't just think, right, I've seen that, I've drawn that, I've drawn that. Just sit with something for a good half an hour because
Hmm.
the seeing will change.
Oh,
Your eye will just get more dark adapted. And I do that thing where I look with one eye, draw with the other, so I look a bit deranged, but that's the way that it works for me. And I find that even when you do sit with something for half an hour or 45 minutes, you can still plow through 10 objects in a night if you're
hmm.
comfy and warm, where you can't do that with astrophotography. So, in a way, you can get way more done by drawing. Then you haven't got the headache of 12 hours of Photoshop processing to deal with afterwards, which I don't enjoy.
Yeah,
It's
and you get to know the feature that you're observing because you're having to translate what you're seeing physically onto a piece of paper.
Yeah, somebody said to me a while ago, well, I've seen all the moon phases now. There's no point looking again. And I was like, that means you really didn't look very carefully because it's never, ever the same twice. There's always a libration difference here
Hmm.
or a shadow that's slightly longer there when you first look at it. And I don't think I've ever even taken a photograph of a feature where it looks identical to another photograph. So when you come to drawing them, there's always something unique there. And it's great with the moon because 2 hours later, those shadows will have completely evolved, and you can
Right.
do another drawing that looks so different
Yeah.
and catch the crater sunrise or a crater sunset. And I don't understand how people aren't excited by that. I love
That's
it.
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, it's not a snapshot in time. It's that moment and you're physically observing what you're looking at. Yeah. What type of materials do you use?
My go-to for Lunar is black paper and white and black pastel pencils. So I tend to use the pencils rather than the sticks, but they do work really well too. And sometimes the chalk pastel sticks do have a bit more pigment, but I tend to use these because they're a bit cleaner.
Okay.
You can get a bit more precision with them, but they're super blendable. And on black paper, they give you that contrast that I feel like the lunar landscape has. It's a very abstract world with the sharp edges on the shadows. The highlights are super bright, and even if I'm drawing from a photograph, I've got my abstract brain in gear, looking at the shapes and where everything is falling. And quite often when I do a moon sketch, I don't look at the crater as a whole. I'm looking at it as a series of abstract shapes. And this gives me that.
Oh,
This gives me the payoff that I like when it comes to the abstract stuff. So I do very little lunar pencil sketching really for my own sake. But during COVID, when my sketching workshops had to be on Zoom, I was obviously not glad about COVID at all, but I was really glad we had Zoom and I was able to
hmm.
teach again. But it made me relearn drawing craters with pencil because that's what everybody had at home. Nobody could
Right.
go out to shops and buy materials.
It's very
So
true.
everybody's got print paper and an HB pencil. So I had to kind of reteach myself how to draw the moon in pencil. And I'm glad that I did that. And I do still teach in pencil in schools sometimes if I don't have, if the class did one the other night where there was 60 children. I don't have enough materials myself for a set of 60. I just don't
Hmm.
have the materials for that. So we did it in pencil. And I do enjoy doing it, but it's never my go-to. For my own sake, it's always pastels every single time because I just love that contrast that you get with the pastels.
Now, are you a trained artist?
Not really. I did an art GCSE, which is like the high school qualification, but I did it a year after I left high school when I was doing my A level sciences. I
Okay.
needed a creative subject to break up the science stuff. And I did that. And I had a few lessons just in still lifes and a few of my landscapes, which are really, truly awful. I'm really not a landscape painter at all. So I did a few things there, and that's when my art teacher clocked the fact that I have this way of seeing things in an abstract way, and I didn't really understand what she meant until years later, looking back at my drawings. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get what she means now. But nothing had made me try to draw an astronomy thing, and I don't know why it took me so many years to do it,
Hmm.
because suddenly I just found a whole new niche. And
Hmm.
whenever I have free time, there's usually some object that's in my things to sketch folder that I want to tackle, or some other drawing project, or a gift for somebody where I'm drawing the moon on their wedding day or something. And
Hmm.
there's always something that I've got in the pipeline to draw. And I can't remember what I did with myself before having that for my free time.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like, why did it take me so many years to try this? I've always loved pastels as well. So the marriage was just waiting to happen, and I just didn't make the connections. But I'm glad I have done it now. And I'm glad that I'm able to teach that to other people who really enjoy it as well.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you do some at the telescope, but you also do some away from a from a photograph, or
Yeah.
okay. All right. And what do you prefer, the telescope more, or what's the
It kind of depends on where my pain levels are. I think
okay?
they're very different. And part of the reason it can be actually more difficult from photographs is that generally your reference images are very high res. You can
Mm,
see every tiny wrinkle, you can see every boulder, you can see every bit of gravel. And there's a tendency to get really hung up on getting every single detail there
okay.
when it's just not necessary. It's I'm not doing these drawings for a scientific journal. I'm doing it because I enjoy drawing them. And while I do try to get the accuracy correct, as long as the basic shapes are there and the basic features of a crater are there, it can be black, white, one shade of grey, and no features on the crater floor at all, and you'll still recognize the crater.
Hmm.
So I find now that if I am using a high res reference photo, I either take my glasses off so I can't see it properly, or I actually deliberately blur the photograph.
Wow.
And the result of that is actually no worse than when I sit there and get agonized for 6 hours. I said to somebody the other day, there are many times I've sat for 6 hours doing a drawing, and for 5 hours of it, I've added no value whatsoever. It's agonizing again over those tiny, oh, there was a dot there, there's a dot here. It's not needed. And the more you practice simplifying it, the easier it gets at the eyepiece, because you can't see that level of detail at the eyepiece. I guess if you've got a 24-inch Dobsonian, you might,
Yeah,
but generally, most people's telescopes and
it's
binoculars are
true.
not going to give you that level of detail. So it's really good practice to use photographs, and it's certainly good for me from an ergonomics perspective. What you can also do if hunched over the eyepiece is difficult is to actually put a camera on and actually draw what you're seeing on your laptop screen. So it's not a stacked image, it's a live view. And
Okay.
that's a good kind of in between where you're still drawing what's at the eyepiece,
It's a good
but
technique.
from
I
a
like that.
screen. And that means I can sit a little bit more comfortably. So I do a bit of all of it really. And
Okay.
it just really, it's determined by what my pain levels are like and what I can tolerate. And also the humidity can be an absolute nightmare if you're
Hmm.
working with pastels. If you've got a low dew point or a high dew point rather, and everything's getting very wet. I've had my pages get wrinkly within 20 minutes.
Mm.
So it's really not conceivable to sit out for hours trying to draw in those conditions. I did hear someone say you can actually get a heated clipboard, which helps with that.
Oh,
I need
mm,
to look into that
yeah.
because that would be a big help.
Mm.
So
Okay.
yeah,
How?
the dew's a big problem here
Yeah.
where I
So
live.
if you're observing through a telescope, how long does an average sketch take? Do you finish it at the telescope, or do you finish it later?
If I'm doing a lunar one at the telescope, I will finish it at the eyepiece.
Okay.
Some of the other stuff I do, I will add. I don't like doing too much once I've gone inside because I like it to be a snapshot of what I was seeing in that
Okay.
moment. And there is always a tendency to add something you couldn't see if you know the object well, and you can't. you can't draw what you see if you're not seeing it live.
That's true.
So I do try to finish my sketches at the eyepiece, with the only exception being hydrogen alpha solar images. But even then, they don't take that long. So I try to do it live for incomplete at the eyepiece. So a moon sketch, if I'm trying to keep it quite simple, I could probably knock one out in about 20 minutes at the eyepiece. Whereas if I do it from a photograph, I can guarantee it'll be more like 2 hours.
No,
Even if I tell myself it won't
yeah.
be, it will be. And as I said, you're not adding any value for the last hour and a half of that. So it's good to actually give yourself a time limit if you're doing it from photos, because you will overcomplicate it otherwise.
Yeah. Now, do you have a favorite object? Lunar crater or something that you love to draw?
Archimedes, I guess it was one of the first craters that I seriously honed in on and drew. And I've got a friend who took a really good reference photograph of it that he lets me use for workshops. So I must have drawn Archimedes in excess of 200 times now. And I've used it as a subject for other parts of talks that I do. And I feel like I've been there. I've done
No.
that exercise where you look at the shadows on a photograph and imagine what the skyline will look like based on those shadows. And that's the only creator I've done that for. But I did a
Hmm.
pastel drawing where obviously the height to diameter is completely whack, but it just gives you that. Well, you know that if there's a long shadow here, that bit must be sticking up a bit more, and that bit's really dipped, so that bit must be lower. And just having a look at the shapes of the shadows and trying to figure out what the skyline would look like. And I've done that looking both ways on an Archimedes sketch. And I just feel like I've been there. It sounds ridiculous, but I genuinely feel
No,
like I've
I
visited
understand that.
Archimedes.
I understand that. Yeah. When I went through the ALPO training program way back in the 70s, I did over 200 drawings of Eratosthenes, one crater,
Oh,
over
wow.
18 months. And that's how we focus on on this training programs. You observe one object, one crater or two or three craters over a long period of time, and you learn that crater, and you learn like 3 hours later, it looks a little different. The shadows might be a little longer and things like that. So developing the eye to do that is amazing. And yeah,
And
spending
you'll
time on,
recognize it on
oh,
any photograph forevermore. Like it, no matter what the moon phase is, you'll be like, yep, that's Archimedes, that's
yeah,
Aristophanes. You
yeah.
you just know it instantly.
I look through a
And
telescope for the first time in the night, and my eye goes there. Boom. How's that look tonight? That's boom. That's the first thing I want to see. Yeah,
I really like the Ptolemaeus trio as well.
yeah.
I've done some really detailed drawings of Ptolemaeus and I really enjoy that. And that was the first time I actually applied the maths where you measure the shadow lengths to calculate the height of the crater wall. So I'm not really particularly good at maths or fond of maths, but I really enjoy doing crater height calculations. And I spend a lot of my Christmas break doing that now.
Okay.
But that was the first crater I did that with. And Sinus Iridum's another favourite. And recently, a friend of mine had taken a picture of the sun setting over Sinus Iridum. And that's a view you don't see as frequently because it's an antisocial time of morning that it happens. I had never photographed it at that phase.
Hmm.
And just seeing, like, the jeweled handle is such a familiar sight. You can't miss it. But seeing the jeweled handle lit from the other side with all the shadows being like projected down onto the floor of Sinus Iridum, I was just like, oh, this is an entirely unfamiliar view of a very familiar part of the moon. And I really enjoyed doing that particular drawing as well, because it compared nicely with the sunrise picture that I'd
Hmm.
done a few years ago. So those are my three favorite lunar areas.
Very
But
nice.
my other favorite is whatever happens to be near the Terminator that night.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
just
that's very true too. Yeah. So I live in Southern California, and we struggle with seeing. The atmosphere, how terrible it can be. I imagine where you live, it's a struggle there too. And
it really can be.
how do you handle that?
You just have to take it, really. You just
Yeah.
have to learn that some nights, and I think it's actually something you can use in your observing journal to say that, yes, this picture doesn't look very detailed tonight because the seeing conditions were poor.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean the drawing's bad. It just means next time you draw it, it'll look different. And so your sketches, when you compare them on those different nights, are telling you way more of a story than just what the lighting angle is. And
Hmm.
I think that's a really valuable record of what you were seeing. So So even if it is just complete fuzz and you can barely see any sharp detail, it doesn't mean your drawing is bad. It just means that that's what the conditions were that night and that's what you've recorded.
I love
So
that.
in the UK, we do get a lot of cloud, but where I live, we're in a very natural sunk down bowl. So we just get so much mist, so much fog, so much dew. But it, you just work with it. You
Yeah.
have no choice, really. And the other thing to do is learn the different cloud types because we get a lot of them. You may as well embrace those while they're here because they're going to turn up at some point. So atmospheric optics, like lunar atmospheric optics, are a really big passion of mine as well. So just because it's a bit cloudy doesn't mean I'm not out looking because I'm looking for halos and moon dogs and coronas and all of that kind of thing. So you just embrace what the conditions are going to give you and just find something new to observe within them.
Great. Now I'm very excited because you're going to give us a demonstration on how you draw, I imagine, a lunar feature today.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, let's set that up.
Right, I'll grab a photograph here and I'm just going to move this camera across because I've got a camera that will be pointing at my hands. And I will just, do you want me to just do like a run through of how I will draw Tycho?
Yeah.
I've got a nice photograph of it here. Okay,
Okay,
right, let me switch views. So you'll now, let me just move that down a bit. So one of the things that I always have with me when I'm doing drawings, as well as my pastels, are Q-tips. And you can get these blending stumps like
hmm
these. They're fine, but I find that they blend a little bit more harshly. Q-tips get very, very fluffy very, very quickly. And the fluffier a Q-tip is, the better it is as an actual drawing implement. So before we do the whole of Tycho, I'll show you what I mean. You can either kind of scribble some pastel down like this and then pick it up and then just draw with it, and it gives you such a soft result. It's really, really nice. And that's great actually for drawing galaxies and
hmm
stuff like that. So you can blend with it. But if you're doing something like a little wrinkle ridge where there's just like a tiny, tiny bit of a depression with a bit of highlight, you can then just kind of go over. Drawing an actual pencil line is going to give you too harsh a result. You can actually just pick up pastels with the Q-tip and actually use it as a really subtle way of adding depressions and little sunken areas, little highlighted areas. You can add different textures on the crater floor like that. And it's just such a great way of getting a soft blend. The other thing you can do just quickly before I draw the whole of Tycho is to just get your pastel and just scratch it
Hmm.
onto the page and then use a brush, then you can dab it and blend it over the paper.
Oh
And
my.
if you're doing a little star cluster, that will give you that background star glow that is impossible to get by drawing on the page and then blending. So that's, I always have paintbrushes with me and a pair of
Huh.
scissors or a craft blade so that you can do the kind of scratching. And because even drawing with a Q-tip doesn't give you the softness and the
Right.
translucence scratching and blend. I'm sure you've done the scratch and blend with graphite pencil.
Yeah.
It's a commonly
But
used
that
technique.
looks great, like even for comets and things like that too. For if
Oh
you,
yeah, definitely for
yeah.
comets. So the way that I would tackle like a whole sketch like this, or whether it was at the eyepiece or from a photograph, is first of all just have a look at the shape. One thing I'm really guilty of doing without even realizing it is correcting for the foreshortening. And I don't do it on purpose, but quite often when you get a crater like Tycho, it's oval rather than round. And I'll look at
Mhm.
my sketch afterwards and I've made it round because it is round, but draw what you see. You should always draw what you see because it's super important with the libration. So I start off just by kind of going around the outside with my white. I prefer to do highlights first and remembering that the really bright highlights are where all the worst of the best of the sunlight is actually hitting, and then you can kind of get the basic shape of that and remember that the shadows pick up where the really bright highlights sort of fall away,
Mm-hmm.
and then come around this side and kind of do the outline here. And when I first start doing this, it will probably not be super accurate, but that's okay. Everybody will still recognize it. If you're doing it for Scientific American, then you do have to use your calipers and get everything right. But as somebody that's fairly new to sketching, just park that idea behind and not worry about that. So you get your basic shape like that, and straight away you notice that the crater walls are not in any way uniform. There's
Mm-hmm.
no symmetry there. There's no smoothness anywhere. It's straight away you've noticed that. So once I've got the basic outline, I like to look at where all the really bright shadows are, and I find doing bright shadows first is less messy than doing the bright highlights, rather, is better than doing the black shadows, because then you end up covered in black pastel and can smudge it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So what I always say to people is, what you're doing, obviously you want to get the main features correct, so we can do those really bright white bits like this and try and get the shape of that correct. But all the bit that's kind of below that, with the slump terraces, what you're wanting to do is use your pencil to get a texture that is mimicking what your eye is seeing, either at the eyepiece or from the photograph. And that means that you don't have to have absolutely every ripple of that wrinkle ridge in exactly the right place. What you're doing is getting textures that are mimicking what the eye is seeing. And that could mean that you're just doing some swirls or some dots and dashes. Ultimately, the really bright highlights are important, the shape is important, and the really dark shadows are super important. The other bits will kind of fall into place. And the more you do it, the more accurate you can get with that. But once you've got the really white bits on, you're already, because it's on black paper, starting to see that it looks a little bit 3D.
Mm-hmm.
But when we come to doing these bits here, you can kind of mark out where they fall down to, kind of within the center, just so that you've got a sort of boundary so you
Mm-hmm.
don't go too far beyond. And then that's probably too far in, but we'll go with it. And then within that, I will just kind of do a series of squiggles like this. So it may not be that every single bit of this is accurate to where the slumps are, but it's giving the illusion of slumped texture. And that's kind of what the important goal is when you're doing a quick sketch. Because if you was to actually sit and get every single wrinkle in exactly the right place, it would take you so long that the shadows will have changed. So this is a way of kind of doing it a little bit faster, and you can kind of smudge over that with your finger or a Q-tip. Then anywhere when we do shadows, there will be some areas that have got like a dark shadow there. If those are in the right place, this illusion of texture is all that's important for the rest of that side. The central peak of Tycho here. My favorite image actually from the whole of the space industry of exploration of all of our solar system is that sun rising over central peak of Tycho from the LRO. I've
Mm-hmm.
done a drawing of that and it took me 3 weeks,
Oh
and
my.
I should have not spent 3 weeks on it, but what an amazing view that is. It's just gorgeous. And I always think of that when I'm drawing Tycho. So there's the bright central peak, and then there are some other kind of little foothills here that are catching the light. And while I've still got the white, there is always some stuff that's just catching the
Mm-hmm.
light on this edge here. So I would kind of go in and just not as bright as the other side. So I don't press on as hard there. We're just showing that there's some brightness here, but it's mostly to contrast against the shadows that we're going to do next. So those little areas there that are just showing a little bit of that bright shadow, I keep saying bright shadow, bright highlight is the words that my brain is trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not as bright as this white bit over here. This is
Right.
super, super bright. So you don't really want to interfere with that too much. So before I do the crater floor, I then like to go in and do the shadows. So we've got some shadows in here being cast by those little foothills, the beautiful shape of the central peak. which you will see all the indentations, and that's when you realize how uneven those peaks are. Then just kind of color those in. And then on this edge here, anywhere that there were any kind of obvious shadows that are important to the overall shape, you can go in and do those. And around this outside edge here, just to contrast against that. How far you go beyond the crater really depends on how much time you have. The further out you go, the more 3D the whole image will be. But sometimes it's important just to focus on the crater and not everything else. So then I'll go in and add the shadows on the crater floor. And again, where the highlights kind of finish is where the shadow always picks up. They're always in two parts. And then that kind of comes around, and so I'm doing this very quickly. I would normally take a little bit more time than
I
this.
understand.
And then anywhere that you've got complexity like this, again, if you squint at it, you'll realize the shadow comes to here and it's just got a little V shape within it. So you can do the shadows all the way to here, and then just make sure that you go in with your white pencil and just add that little feature there.
Okay.
That's an easier way of dealing with it than trying to get every little bit of shape in between, which can again be quite overwhelming. Then I'll go in and kind of color all of that in. Now, for a long time when I first started drawing, I was obsessed with hiding every single pencil line. So if I scribbled in over an area like this, I would blend it away so there was absolutely no sign whatsoever that it had been done by a human being. And if you look at Galileo's drawings, that you can very much see the pencil lines. And I think it's important that it's fine to blend, but when you blend a shadow on the lunar surface, you're losing the crispness. And the crispness of the shadows is what makes the landscape so gorgeous. So if you do blend over any of these areas, just don't go near the edges of your shadows, because there's no atmosphere to diffuse it. And that's what gives us that
Uh,
really gorgeous, gorgeous effect.
wh-
So I would spend a bit of time kind of going and making sure that was all super, super, super dark.
okay. What
And
is the
then just,
paper you're using?
it's a company called Frisk, and it's black A4 sketching paper. And it's not actually paper designed for pastels.
Hmm.
And I personally prefer it. People that are pastel artists will be absolutely crying in their tea right now, but I find that it's got a smoother blend and it's more forgiving. So if you do make a mistake, you can kind of blend over it and go over the top
Okay.
again with the white or the black. And it's very, very forgiving and just easier to use. Pastel paper has got the texture that just basically bites the pastel really well, and that's good. It makes it stay put better. But the downside of it staying put better is that you can't blend it quite so well.
Hmm.
So I personally prefer this paper. So once the shadows are in, you can kind of just use the pastel on its side and just fill in the area. So what you're doing here is this area here is not as light as our slump terrace area, but it's much smoother. So I tend to use the pastel on its side, and then I will blend this one because crater floors generally are a bit smoother. There is some texture on here that for the most part you could ignore. If you was at the eyepiece, there's no way you're going to see all this. Like there's no way unless you've got a humongous telescope. And if you did, it would probably hurt your eyes to look at this anyway. So once I've got like the floor down like that, I'll go in with my Q-tip and just make it a little bit smoother. And all the time you're looking at what tone am I looking for here that's going to contrast against my highlights and my shadows. So I don't blend it thoroughly because there is no crater floor that is actually completely uniform in its tone.
Right.
There's always differences. And even if you've got some lighter bits and darker bits in the wrong place, it's still giving the illusion that there is some texture in that crater floor. So once you've got the crater floor on, you can then look again and see whether you need to go in and brighten up any of those other slump terraces, because it's hard to know until you've got your mid-tone how bright you need to go with the slumps. And then you could just kind of go in and add some little dots here to simulate that gravel. If there's a tiny craterlet, there isn't one, but if I was doing one, you just basically do a tiny dot with a little white edge on it, and that's all you need to do. And then you've got a little tiny crater
Oh,
within the
wow.
crater. You can't actually see that. Let me bring that
Yeah.
down. So I basically just did a dot with just two tiny white edges, and that's all you need to do for the little craterlets. But all of this texture here, you can just basically just do some dots to say give the illusion of that texture that you're seeing.
Hmm.
And likewise up on the outer crater wall here, you can see that just beyond there's all of this textured stuff
Right.
here. I would do exactly the same there, just kind of going in doing lots of dots. If you've got very hummocky foothills, you can kind of do this thing where you're just making little circles. Like when you're a child and you're drawing curly hair, that's an absolutely brilliant technique for it, simulating this hummocky texture. So you can do a series of dots, a series of kind of curly hair squiggles. And I tend to do all of this with my white. And then if I do need to dull it down at all, then I will go in with the black afterwards. And so once you've got this, it's already looking quite 3D. And
Hmm.
depending how much time you have, every feature that you add around the outside of the crater that
Right.
has also got highlight and shade, that is going to keep just selling that idea that the sun is shining from this side, we've got shadows going this way. If you don't want to do that, then what I do to make it look like I haven't forgotten to finish this, that I've finished it intentionally, is again just go in with a very, very light, barely any pressure, just around the outside, just to make it look like, yeah, we've intended to finish it here. You can do this first and then add the other stuff if you want to, but this just gives it boundary, even though obviously the area around it doesn't look exactly like that. So
Hmm.
I would kind of do that and blend it over and then add any other texture. But all the time you're looking, whenever you've got a textural change, like you've got here and here or here and here, what can I do with my pencil that's going to just demonstrate that that is going on there? So up here we've got all those dots, but beyond it might be smoother. So it's just about looking at it in sections and just working your way around. Unusually, this crater doesn't have massive shadows on the outside of the crater wall because it's so deep and very slumped, but many craters actually are casting shadows out beyond, and
Hmm.
people often miss those. So they're just as important as the ones on the crater floor.
Right.
So always look for those. Remember, there's the highlights will pick up where the shadow finishes, and that's the same on the outside as well. There will usually be crater shadows being projected
Hmm.
onto the outside. So that's kind of very quickly how I would tackle a lunar feature. And I use pretty much the same techniques all the time, depending on the feature. But if there was an area again in here where the area slumped down, you can just go in with barely any pressure and just give the illusion of that little dark bit. You can go in and just add a little highlight alongside it, and straight away you look like you've got something that's kind of slumped down. So it's all about light and shade, just using light and shade to get the textures that you're seeing.
That's remarkable, Mary. That's really good. I like that. Do you consider your sketches to be scientifically accurate?
No,
Why not?
I'll just turn that off a second. I can turn that back on if we
Okay.
want to do any other
Okay.
demonstrating. Um, I don't, and I do try to get them as accurate as possible. But I remember when the very first time I'd done a big area of the lunar landscape, I'd used a photograph from Pete Lawrence had taken from Sky at Night magazine, and basically I'd done this thing, I'd spent ages on it. And one of the things I'd done wrong is zoomed in on the picture to get some detail, forgot to zoom out again. So half the drawing was at one zoom, the
Hmm.
other half was completely disproportionate. And somebody, I guess it was flattering, somebody said, "Oh, you've just taken a photograph and put a Photoshop art filter on it." And I was crushed
Mm.
because I'd spent so long doing it. And I've actually felt like just showing them how not accurate my sketches actually are. There's not a single one that would hold up if I had a photograph and I overlaid them in Photoshop. And I'm okay with that. If I was doing it for a science journal, I would get an eyepiece with a reticule in it and try to measure my prominences on the sun and try to make sure that my sunspots are exactly the right size relative to the whole disk. But I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it because I want to learn about the lunar landscape, or I want to learn more about sunspots. And I get what I need to by doing it my way. And I think when you're teaching it to people as beginners, they're so worried about it being wrong that they think you're going to have a protractor and a ruler and a grid and copy it absolutely spot on. And it's like, just park that idea. Just do it. Just do it for a while. And then if you like it, then you can think about how can I improve the accuracy.
Well,
And using the grids is a really good way of doing that. If you did want to get super accurate, you can get the gridded reticules to go into your eyepiece,
hmm
so everything is in a grid, and then you can draw each grid in turn. I think it would ruin the fun for me if I did that, honestly. And I don't have a need to do it. So I'm okay with the fact that my sketches are not that accurate.
yeah,
I don't know whether
well,
other people are okay with that.
I think they're accurate. I think they're beautiful works of art, but also I believe they're accurate. I don't know anybody in our organization that uses a reticle eyepiece for drawing their lunar crater, and we have thousands of images, and the the belts and zones of Jupiter. I don't know anybody that uses reticle eyepieces to put those in. They're putting what they see relative to the disk or relative to the features around that lunar crater. So to say yours aren't technically accurate, I beg to differ. I really do.
Oh, thank
I've
you.
seen
I'll
thousands
take
of
that.
lunar sketches in my life, and no, that's why I reached out to you because the work you do, I think, matches and marries up very well to what this organization is all about.
That's great. Well, I always say to people as well that if you get too hung up on it being perfection, first of all, just take a photograph.
Hmm.
Second of all, you're losing your own artistic style. And one of the things that I love the most when I do a sketching workshop is I'll have 25 people draw Archimedes. No two of the drawings look alike. And
Hmm.
yet they're all so obviously recognizable as Archimedes. And I often use the analogy that if I had a class of people and I got everybody to write out a Shakespeare passage in their handwriting, it would ultimately all still be Shakespeare, but it would be your own unique way of writing
Hmm.
Shakespeare because of the way you hold your pen, your writing style. And I think it's wrong to stamp out somebody's drawing style. You might have a particular way
Oh,
that you blend that's different, and that's fine. I've never done a workshop where I haven't learned from the people that attend. Whenever I'm doing it, I'm looking at how everyone else is drawing. How can I incorporate that technique into my work?
mm,
Because everybody draws differently. Everyone holds a pencil differently. Some days, if I've had a stressful day, I'm heavy handed and really press on hard. And that looks completely different from a day where I'm in a la la mood and I'm just doing some soft little sketching. Like this completely chalk and cheese. My own sketches don't even look like my own work some days.
no,
So I think it's wrong to take people's own artistic interpretation of something away from them. And ultimately, it's done by a human. And in a world where everything's AI now
right.
and looking for that AI perfection, where's the soul?
Uh, Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. What when you're teaching new people to draw, most people have never ever drawn a lunar crater in their life. What details do beginners usually miss?
Not that much, actually.
Mm,
A lot of the time, they're not necessarily seeing the bit beyond the crater quite so well. They're
okay.
focused on the features on the inside. It's more the big hurdle that I come against is, especially when teaching an astronomy group, is they're so terrified of it not being perfect that they become incredibly guarded and stilted, and they just feel they're going to do a bad job. Nobody ever does, by the way. Everyone's
Hmm.
always great. Once they realize, well, all you're doing is that shape, then all you're doing is that shape, and breaking it into steps, it suddenly becomes manageable. And then at the end, you hold it up and say, look, that's what you've just done. And their face, they're like, did I do that? My art teacher told me I couldn't draw. And there's nothing beats that feeling of seeing their face change when they actually see their picture held up and realize what they've done.
Mm.
And there's not really anything too serious that they miss, other than the bit maybe around the outside of the bit they're focused on drawing.
Okay.
And so I learn from people every time I do a workshop and
Hmm.
see how they've tackled it, how it just makes me so happy to see people having a go. And I had a weird experience last year. I'd done a workshop online during COVID and hadn't heard from the group again. And I got an email out of the blue from somebody saying, oh, you won't remember me, but I was on Zoom, I did your workshop. Not only has it become an everyday part of my observing now, but I've got an exhibition in an art gallery in Coventry. Do you want to come to the opening day? And I was just like, oh my, that just made my
That,
decade. Like, not only had they had the confidence to take it forward, but enough that they were being exhibited. I was just so, felt like a really proud parent when I went to that.
and you should,
Even
yeah.
though he was older than me, I still felt like a proud parent. I was just so like, yes, like even if you've hit one person in a
Yeah.
group, that's it's just amazing to give people the confidence to just keep going with it.
Yeah. Now, do you ever sketch like lunar domes or less subtle, very subtle features on the moon?
I have done as part of a bigger landscape. There's usually something big that grabs my attention, and then there'll be like maybe a little dome or some wrinkle ridge or something like that that is
Okay.
coming out from that feature. And I do really enjoy doing those. Like the sunken craters are a really good one because if you go too hard, it just looks like another crater. If you go too soft, you can't see it. So
Hmm.
getting that balance right of using the Q-tip to draw and blend and just make a lot of that is getting the tonal difference between the floor of the slumped bit versus the higher bit, and then that's what gives you the illusion that one bit's lower than the other. And that takes quite a bit of concentration and blending and a few goes over to get the tones right with that. But it's really good fun, and very often it will be something like that, or just one outlying individual dome that's casting a shadow will be the one thing that makes that sketch go from okay to wow, that's really 3D. There'll
Yeah.
be one white blob and one black triangle that's just off the side, and suddenly the whole picture is leaping off the page. And without that one white blob and the black triangle, it doesn't have the same impact. So I do, if I have time, take a lot of time to look at the features around to see if I can get something else that's going to help with the 3D effect that you're trying to capture on paper. And I love doing those things. They're more subtle and don't get the same amount of attention. So I do enjoy doing that.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a few lunar dome drawings that look three-dimensional, and it just, I don't have that skill level. I've been doing this for years, but I don't have that skill level to make a dome look like a dome. It's amazing to me to see some of these drawings that are coming out.
You get the crater dome illusion going on as well. If I
Yeah.
draw a dome, it's invariably going to look like a crater. It's just,
Hey,
it's really tricky. It's
yeah,
really
yeah,
tricky to get that looking like it's projecting out rather
right.
than going in.
That's true. That's true. So if someone wanted to start drawing the moon tonight, what do they need?
First of all, don't invest a lot of money in expensive materials until you've had a go a few times, because you may find that you prefer to use stick pastels versus pencils or vice versa. You may decide that you just want to do it in pencil and white paper because that's what you have at home. I The worst thing you can do is go out and spend a ton of money on art materials and realize actually I prefer that medium. So experiment with what you
Okay.
have around, buy some budget pastels. For the beginning, I actually bought a whole set of coloured pastel pencils because I bought them for drawing solar prominences.
Oh, okay.
But if I hadn't done that, I could have got by with just one black and one white, and that's kind of all I ever use on the moon. For up close, I don't use any colour at all. So you need exactly two pastel pencils or one white stick, one charcoal stick, and just play with the medium and get used to it and then decide whether it is actually for you. And it's good to put yourself out of your comfort zone with different art mediums, but ultimately you've got to use what you're comfortable with that will make you want to go back and do it again. And it will take a few goes for you to find what medium you prefer and also the order that you want to draw in. I like to do highlights, shadows, midtones. Some people prefer to do the shadows first. That's completely fine.
Hmm.
So find your own way of figuring out how it works best for you, and don't let anyone tell you that you're doing it wrong, because there's
Very good.
plenty of experts out there that will try to jump on what you're doing. Just
Yeah. So you've been doing this a long time. What's the most challenging feature you've ever drawn?
Rima Gay Lussac, and I don't know why I struggled with it so much. I was there's a book called Who's Who in the Moon that came out. I think it's available outside of the UK. Brian Jones, who does the Yearbook of Astronomy, resurrected an idea that was from the British Astronomical Association journal years ago, all about the people that lunar craters are named after. And I I created about 11 illustrations for that book for them.
Oh my.
And one of them was Rima Gay Lussac. And the only photograph I had was not the best lighting angle. And I think it was an LRO photo, but either way, I just struggled. It took me longer to do that than almost anything else that I've ever drawn. And I look at the picture now and I'm like, why did that take so long? It doesn't look all that special to me. But weirdly, I got an email out of the blue saying, I've just got this book. I had to email you. That Rima Gay Lussac picture is the best thing in the whole book. And I was like, really? I don't think
Oh.
so. But
Well,
somebody else had
we're our own
spotted
worst
it.
critic too, so you gotta.
Oh, always,
Yeah.
absolutely always. So that was so hard. And I think the problem was that there wasn't a lot of tonal difference in the different areas. It was a very complex region with just a dark shadow running through the reel.
Hmm.
And I couldn't get it to look how I wanted at all. I scrubbed and started again a few times. And I think when you get to that level of frustration, you just have to step away for a
Hmm.
few hours and come back fresh and just forget that that happened and don't get too, because the harder you think it is, the worse your drawing will be.
Hmm.
So you have to just like, right, okay, we're not doing this now, we're going to go and have a cup of coffee and come back in half an hour and try again.
Okay.
And it's okay to get it wrong a few times before you get it right. So if you
Yeah.
do find you're struggling with a particular feature, don't give up, just go back to it and try again.
Yeah. What feature on the moon would you recommend to someone just starting out to work on and practice?
Archimedes.
Yeah.
It's
That's your baby.
visible. Yeah, that what I like about Archimedes, I think I've got a photograph of it here because I these are still here from my workshop. What I like about Archimedes is that the floor of the crater is actually very smooth. So it's actually quite a nice one to that the orientation will be out of
Hmm.
whack because it was a mirror telescope. But it's got some very unique features like this little bit here that projects down
Hmm.
that makes it very recognizable. It's got lots of these craters around the outside,
Hmm.
and like this little guy here casting that shadow. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was talking about. When I did this drawing, the minute I put that blob and black triangle on, I'm like, oh, now everything looks very 3D. It's got a very smooth floor. It's got some
Hmm.
interesting shadows. And actually, when I deliberately blurred this for workshops so that you couldn't see all the gravel and all of the detail, that's a very approachable sketch. And overwhelmingly, when faced with a series of photographs on my table, people say, I want to draw that because
Hmm.
this is the one that looks the most
Yeah. And there's
approachable.
a lot
But
going on there.
there is quite a lot going on, but the basic shapes of it are very, very achievable,
Hmm.
and I just absolutely love it. And it's visible. under a like after we've gone past first quarter, that's when the sun is rising over that area. So it's not too late at night if you're going to
Okay.
do it at the eyepiece. And then when the sun is setting over that area again, it's not too stupid o'clock in the morning to have to get up and look at it. So it's kind of in a nice position to actually be having a look. But that's always very popular. And I actually think the Ptolemaeus trio as well, although there's a lot going
There's a
on
lot.
in there,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. But again, if you deliberately take your glasses off and don't look at it in too much detail, it's actually quite a lovely
Hmm.
crater trio to draw.
Very
And a
nice.
lot of people chose that at Astrofest workshops this year. Loads of people had a go at that. And actually, other people's drawings of that have made me want to revisit and draw it again myself because I prefer theirs to my version. So
Ah,
I learned a lot of that at the workshop as well.
great. Now you talked about workshops. What do you have going on in this world for you right now?
I'm so fortunate that I kind of get to do astronomy related stuff as a job. So I do a lot of astronomy talks. I do workshops in schools and also at astronomy festivals, astronomy societies. I don't just do drawing workshops. I've got a whole long list of talks that I do.
Okay.
But as well as that, I'm a writer. So I contribute regularly to Sky at Night magazine and I co-wrote the Colin Stargazer's Bible a couple of years ago. So that was co-written with Ian Ridpath, which again was a such a pinch me moment for me because I've respected Ian Ridpath and his writing for decades, and so to have worked with him on a project was amazing. And the rest of the time I'm just doing astrophotography and sketching for fun. There's always something astronomy going on. And in the last couple of years as well, I've started writing equipment reviews for magazines as well. So you get to play with exciting new toys, write a review, but sadly they then have to be sent back. But at
Mm,
least you get to play with it for a bit.
yeah, very good. So where can our viewers find your work?
If you go to marymcintyreastronomy.co.uk, all of my social media stuff is linked on the homepage there. So that's probably the quickest and easiest way to find me.
Okay. And I want to encourage you to submit your observations to the ALPO lunar section. I really do.
I will.
I'd like to see
If you
your
think they're good enough.
I Yes, I do. And we have a publication our lunar section puts out. It's called the Lunar Observer. It's a free publication. It's probably 50 pages long. It's put out every month by our Dave Teskey, who runs our lunar program. I will send you a copy of that and put you on their email list because I'd love to see your drawings in there as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Now, you also do planetary observing too, planetary drawings?
Not so much at the eyepiece.
Okay.
Planetary is one area where I've never feel that I've particularly found my groove. I can image the planets.
Okay.
My favorite telescope for imaging the planets is our 10-inch Dobsonian, and we have an Orion 10-inch Dobsonian that's computerized with GoTo.
Okay.
And being 10-inch, obviously things move out of shot incredibly fast, especially when you put Barlow's in there. And it's incredibly annoying that the electronics have died on the telescope. So
Uh,
it's a push me Dob, except it's really sticky because it's got gears and doesn't like being pushed manually. So I feel like I just can't cope with that telescope right now, and that makes me incredibly sad. So
mm,
most of my observing is with either the little Helios refractor or I use our William Optics 70 mil with Barlow's in there, and I do imaging that way, but I just don't really feel that I can see enough detail to make it worth putting on paper anymore through
okay.
the eyepiece. So that's one area that I'd like to get better at. The Dobsonian is great for planets. I
Mhm.
absolutely love it. I really do. And I just wish we could figure out a way of getting that fixed. But Orion are no more. So there's absolutely no chance that's going to happen right now. So we need to get somebody that's good with electronics to have a look at it for us. But I do want to improve on planetary stuff. It's something that I definitely feel that I've not
Okay.
quite found my place with yet.
Okay. Well, Mary, I want to thank you for preserving the observational traditions of drawing. I really do, because you're taking us back to where we all started, and I love it. I really do. And your work is fascinating.
Oh, I'm so glad people enjoy it because you put it out online, you don't know who's even looking, let alone if they're getting any value from it. That's not why I do it, but
Hmm.
it's nice when people are appreciative of it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. A big thank you to Mary McIntyre for coming on today and sharing her insights to drawing the moon. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to give a thumbs up, subscribe, and share the podcast. It really helps reach more listeners. New episodes of the Observer's Notebook are released on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and the ALPO YouTube channel. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so through Patreon. For as little as a few dollars a month, up to $35 a month, we receive exclusive benefits, including 1-year membership to the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers and producer credits right here on the show. You'll find links for our Patreon and ALPO website in the show notes. And a special thank you, as always, to the producers, Steve Seidentop and Michael Moyer, for the continued generous support of the Observer's Notebook podcast. And if you'd like to reach me directly, you can email me anytime at tim.robertson@alpo-astronomy.org. Clear skies. Have a great day. You can join the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers today. It's just this easy. You can become a valuable member of this International Lunar and Planetary Astronomy Organization, founded in 1947 by Walter H. Haas. It's based upon the structure of the British Astronomical Association. You can join various lunar and planetary observing sections, contribute to our massive archive of observations. You'll have access to our extensive lunar and planetary gallery of over 20,000 photos and observations of the sun, the moon, comets, meteors, and the planets. You'll receive our quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. You have the ability to join the ALPO training program, which will teach you the finer points of making planetary observations. You can attend our annual virtual conference, and you'll have access to the Observer's Notebook podcast. Membership begins at only $22 a year. The way to find us, just go to your Google and type in ALPO astronomy, and you'll see this prompt come up. There's our association with our website, alpo-astronomy.org, and you'll come to our homepage. If you look at the top of the homepage, it says Join ALPO. Click on that, and you'll come to the sign-up screen. It gives you the information on the organization, and there's 2 ways to join. You can join by mail, where you will download a membership form, or you can pay online using PayPal. This is the PayPal processing page. You just fill out a few information lines, and then you're given the chance to click PayPal and join the association. Welcome to the ALPO.